Welcome dear learners. This lecture on ethnography studies in India has been developed based on some selected ethnography studies done in India. It has been divided into three major segments for the discussion as cases. They are ethnography studies done by British School of Thought, American and French School of Thought, and ethnography studies done in India from within. Shall we now go to the topic? Dear learners, in this session, ethnography studies done in India mainly since its independence in 1947, thus for 75 years now, by trained sociologists, anthropologists and folklorists in all corners of India will be discussed. Through the decades, anthropological discourses about Indian society have developed their own specificity, while at the same time the anthropology of India has also had an impact on the discipline as a whole. There is no cardinal way to conduct ethnographic fieldwork since it depends on numerous factors such as topic, personality, region, political context and perhaps not so frequently acknowledged coincidence. However, doing ethnography or in any case being concerned with ethnographic reality, socio-cultural content and form, even if from a distance in time or space, is the very heart of our discipline and is certainly not restricted to any places and groups. Now, we will look in the case 1 as the British School of Thought. Village India, Studies in the Little Community by Marriott in 1955 was a landmark book in the study of Indian society and culture. It exemplifies a general shift in anthropology and toward the study of complex societies. The anthropology of India contributed significantly to this shift. Before independence, few professional Western anthropologists chose India as their field of research, and many of those who did studied tribal societies as this seemed appropriate then. The reverse Mandelbaum and A. Ayyappan, who studied in London, was the main exception to the generalization that professional anthropologists studied tribal peoples. After Second World War, ethnographic research in India received a new force, as did other regions of strategic, economic and political interest, and several American universities in particular initiated well-funded research programs to study Indian civilization from a grassroots empirical perspectives. Another work, Village India of M. Srinivas, presented the first results of this new ethnographic endeavor. Many of the contributions were the reports of young anthropologists, Indian, British and American, who had just returned from the field. The framework of the book as a whole, however, was conceived by the established anthropologists Robert Redfield and Milton Singer, both of the University of Chicago, who edited a whole series of broad social scientific research projects called Comparative Studies of Cultures and Civilizations. M. Srinivas is one of such founding figure of the ethnography studies in India. He was as a representative of the structural functionalist school in British social anthropology. Nevertheless, Srinivas's contribution in Village India is a classic example of an account of social structure. He perceives Ramapura, the pseudonym for his village of study, as a well-defined structural entity and investigates how local castes are on the one hand separated by rules of commensality and on the other hand independent through occupational specialization and patron-client relationships. The dominant caste fulfills, in his view, a unifying function for the village as a whole. Another scholar, Kathleen Kauf, worked on village studies in which she observed the severe social consequences of drastic economic changes, decreasing coherence at the village level and increasing rivalry between castes, especially the contestation of Brahminical dominance in Kumbapettai, a village in the Tanjore district of Tamil Nadu. Not only did Kauf state that the village would soon cease to be a meaningful unit of study in such circumstances, she also exemplified a broadening of anthropological focus to include government policies of new state and party politics. Bernard S. Cohn, who pioneered such a perspective and can be regarded as the precursor of subaltern and post-colonial studies in India. In his early work, Cohn is concerned with attempts at social mobility made by the Chamar, a major untouchable caste of Uttar Pradesh. He used a multifaceted approach that included political status, economy, kinship and religion to account for the changing situation of the Chamar in a particular village. He also stressed that complex processes of change cannot be grasped by focusing on the village alone, and pointed to contradictions in the way the Chamar sought equality within modern context of the nation. Now move on to the case 2, the American and French versions. Louis Dumont, Homo Hierarchicus was one of two books that ultimately signaled the end of the village studies era, the other being Mandelbaum's Society in India. Both books were only possible because of the village studies carried out in 1950s and 1960s. And if we take the first English translation of Homo Hierarchicus, they both appeared in 1970. However, the similarities end there. While Mandelbaum's two volumes are encyclopedic, inductive, descriptive and easy to read, Dumont's book is analytic, deductive and theoretical. The composition of Homo Hierarchicus suggests that the argument is deductive in nature, a general theoretical hypothesis being confronted with empirical data, which might also lead to the assumption that theory comes first and ethnography the empirical second. Finally, being deeply influenced by his teacher Marshall Mast, Dumont held the microscopic aspects of ethnography in high esteem. Therefore, the organization of Homo Hierarchicus obliterates the fact that Dumont developed his argument in close interaction with ethnography. The theory of hierarchy is not only contained in the Varna model, but already in the structural definition of the INR temple, on which Dumont published in 1953. However, the general trends in the discipline of anthropology made themselves felt in India as well. Gede's symbolic anthropology, Levi-Strauss' structuralism, Azad and Said's criticism of colonialism and Orientalism, feminist anthropology and neo-Marxist theories. As more anthropologists came to conduct fieldwork in India, the themes also diversified. Caste and social structure became less dominant topics, while religion began to receive more attention. Now we will look into the case 3, India from within. The new wind changing identities in South Asia can be taken to represent the main developments of the 1970s. Furthermore, as previously it was a young anthropologist who took on the responsibility of editing the volume, Kenneth David, who had received his PhD from Chicago only a year before the conference under the supervision of the by now established Makim Marriott. However, while village India and structure and change hardly provided anything in terms of an introduction and basically presented a collection of articles representing the status quo of the American anthropology of India. The title of the book, The New Wind Changing Identities in South Asia, reflects the changing situation in South Asian societies and suggests innovative approaches to the study of the region. In retrospect, it can be argued that this claim was fulfilled, although the terms that figure in the two section headings which provide the frame for the 17 contributions, the moving and the standing, appear to be a mere reformulation of the well-known structure and the change contradictions. In contrast to social structure, identity implies a less rigid ascribed status, but stresses dynamic aspects of social processes. Thus, actor, arena and strategy are all terms that can be found in the pages of The New Wind. In his contribution, Dumont's theory is criticized, applied, modified and combined. Others, however, do not dismiss Dumont's argument as a whole, but rather criticize specific aspects of it. Mahapatra in 1977, for example, shows that the clear distinction between the king and the religious sphere cannot be maintained when looking at the Jagannath cult in Odisha, where the god is a ruler and the king is a deity. The indigenous notion of blood purity, which crucially defined relational caste and kinship context, was transformed in the process, becoming merely a matter of substance or being, while moral and normative aspects, which means the code, relating to lifestyles became unstressed. This opened up a new avenues for individuals to connect an identity within competing fields such as class, political parties or in Tamil nationalism. Burnett's article is among those that pursue the book's theme of changing identities in the most consistent manner. The ethno-sociology provides the new theoretical wind in the volume. We are dealing here with another of Marriott's changes identities, although contributes are certainly noticeable. Certain methodological aspects of this stage of ethno-sociology deserve mention. First, although Marriott has left the little tradition behind to investigate general cognitive systems, he does not to do away with ethnography. Local narratives recorded by the ethnographer can provide cognitive statements, as do Sanskrit texts in which Marriott searches for key indigenous categories. Hence, again like Dumont, Marriott brings into interaction classical text and ethnography as such, Indology and anthropology. In the second place, however, underlying this procedure is the assumption of a fundamental continuity of Indian culture over millennia, which Marriott makes quite explicit. History, or rather historiography, was a dominant influence throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Each of the approaches discussed so far had its own relationship to a diachronic perspective. Renowned scholars such as Redfield, Singer, Marriott took notice of historical developments regarding the constant interaction between the two levels of great and little traditions. Most anthropologists, not only the individualists among them, do not follow any single theoretical paradigm or methodology, but pick and choose whatever helps them make sense of their research. Furthermore, national anthropological traditions have been internationalized and their contours are less sharp than they used to be. Thus, one must perhaps speak of different theoretical currents or perspectives rather than strictly distinct stands or academic traditions. One such perspective that continues to influence the anthropology of India is Dumont's brand of structuralism. Many still consider his stress on the study of values to be important and apply his ideas to new sets of ethnographic problems and themes, although today few anthropologists would perhaps oppose individualism to holism in the way he did. Then the second thing is that truly innovative theoretical current that has perhaps succeeded to a greater extent is ethnosociology. Scholars whose contributions demonstrate the lifelessness and artificiality of theory when the genuine dialogue with ethnography is abandoned. British anthropologists dealing with India were usually sympathetic to, if critical of, Dumont, but much less convinced by Marriott's theory. Fuller and Spencer's review of the 1980s could serve as an example of this. Figures such as Richard Burhart, an American trained and at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, and David Pocock may also demonstrate a typical eclecticism. While studying values, they stress ambivalence within ideologies and highlight history and agency. It seems that many British anthropologists share an emphasis on ethnography and an unease with allegedly universal dichotomies and over consistent representations of cultural and social phenomena. Something similar could probably be said about Indian anthropology in the sense that anthropologists there follow diverse theoretical orientations and no one general anthropological theory has been developed there. However, even L.P. Vidyarthi had been correct in asserting that Indian anthropology had been born and brought up under the dominant influence of British anthropology. Patricia Uberai, Nandini Sundar and Satish Deshpande recent contribution shows that Indian anthropology can now look back on a vibrant tradition in its own right. This outline has shown that theoretical perspectives involved in the anthropology of India have been as diverse as the social and cultural phenomena being studied. As long as a scholar working from a theoretical perspective is able to engage in an ongoing dialogue with ethnographic material and can generate new analytic impulses on the basis of this correspondent, that will in turn facilitate the understanding of social processes and patterns, it will be alive and well disconnected from ethnography. A theory soon loses its heuristic value of anthropology. Dear learners, in this lecture, we have discussed about the ethnographies done by various scholars through the ages in India. It has been divided, as earlier said, into three major segments for the discussion as cases. They are ethnography studies done by British School of Thought anthropologists, and then American and French vision, and then finally ethnography studies done in India from within. I hope you all must have enjoyed the session and it may have enriched the knowledge on the history of ethnography and the studies in ethnography. We will meet with another schedule. Thank you and all the best.